Grace, peace, and welcome to Podcast of the Wills, the podcast that treats Star Wars like a sacred text. I am your host, Nick Milkey, and we are here hanging out on a Sunday night to record another episode, even despite the fact that that certain quote-unquote big game is going on. Sports ball, if that's your thing. I love sports, but the Super Bowl doesn't necessarily float my boat. I got to see the halftime show. That was what I was most excited about. And I got to not see the Obi-Wan Kenobi trailer, which will continue to not show up tonight for the second half of the Super Bowl. So we're here. We're going to record. We're going to get another episode in. Last week, we finished up chapter 6 of our canon studies, the 6th chapter of Return of the Jedi. But what I wanted to do, and I had been kicking the idea around for a little bit, was I like the idea of doing like a wrap up at the end, not with any of the guests that we had for those 6 chapters, but somebody else, somebody I know who loved Return of the Jedi, who loves Return of the Jedi, and would have some fun insight to plug into that. So that's who we have tonight, and we'll get to that in just a minute. If you're watching right now, you already know who it is because you're Patreons and your patron supporters. Thank you for that, by the way. Thank you for being here. Thank you for hanging out tonight. I do see Matthew. I see Michael. I see Framey. I always appreciate y'all. I always appreciate the fact that you hang out on Sunday night and add to our conversation. We have t-shirts. We have streaming Star Wars stuff. We also have Podcast of the Will stuff. Pete also has ATG stuff. I'll plug it all. Ride for the brand. It was all on sale this weekend, I think until yesterday. So we missed the sale. It will be on sale again soon. But if you need some merchandise, if you need some t-shirts, especially, and I wore mine Friday night, we are especially proud of the Bad Takes and Brown Liquor t-shirt that has our new mascot, R5 Drink More, on the back of it, which is, of course, an R5 droid with the whiskey glass as a head. So if you haven't seen that yet, go check it out at all of our TeePublic pages. Lots of fun stuff there. But tonight, my guests tonight are David and Timothy from As Father and Son. If you have seen Podcast of the Wills, they've been on with me before, both individually, both together. These are some of my favorite guys and some of my favorite people to have conversations with. So without further ado, I'm going to bring them in. I'm going to pause for half a second because you know what? I get to tell you this. You get to peek behind the curtain. When I cut it for audio, it makes it easier for me to cut the beginning of the show. So I'm going to bring them in. I'm going to welcome them, and we're going to get to talking about Star Wars. So David and Timothy, let's do this. Guys, how's it going?
Hello.
Hello, hello.
How are y'all tonight?
Excellent.
Doing so good. So happy to be here.
Yeah, we've both been talking about how excited we are to get to talk Star Wars with somebody.
I have been looking forward to this a lot.
Well, and as we discussed before we came on air, there's been some big life changes. Timothy's had moving situations, and so studios are in flux, and just the busyness of life has, I know, kept the two of you a little bit away from some of our Star Wars nerdery and recording and those kinds of things. And so we have all missed you, and I feel especially honored that I get to spend some time slowly reeling you both back into this world to hang out and have a conversation.
I would say thank you for inviting us, but you and I both know, Nick, that I invited us on the show. And as I was listening to some of the...
Yes, you did invite.
I was listening to the Empire Strikes Back canon studies that you're doing, and I know Mark Newbold sort of said, he didn't invite himself, but he always puts out there, hey, I want to be on your show, or let me know. So, and then I was listening to a lot of the great stuff on the Empire Strikes Back stuff, and I thought about the Return of the Jedi, and I texted him. I literally was looking it up as you were, doing your show opener, and I was like, what did I say to him? Oh yeah, I did. I invited us. I did. And I was like, hey, if you don't have your guests lined out, we would love to come talk Return of the Jedi.
Well, and it couldn't have been more timely, and exactly like I said, we did the first run with my original co-host Steve, and then I did the Empire run several months back, and it almost like I loved it when it was over with, but it was those 6 chapters and then it was just over. And so after the Empire run, I started kicking around this idea of like, what about a wrap-up episode? What about one more, tie a bow on it? And so it was literally, I had laid out some of the guests. I had most of them in place, but I hadn't figured that part out yet. And when you sent me that text, I was like, that's it. That's the one right there. So it was exactly perfect.
So thank you for inviting us on your show.
You're welcome.
And I want to say hi to everybody. It was nice of you. I want to say hi to everybody in the chat. I can see familiar names, Framey and Matt, and I think I saw Michael Nibb. So hello.
Yes.
Thank you all for joining us.
Lots of fun friends hanging out tonight.
Yeah. On this nice Sunday evening.
Let's do this. It's always possible. It seems unlikely, but it's always possible that I have some new listeners. Pete and I have teamed up with the ATG Cast feed to alternate weeks. And so new listeners, new folks that are finding Podcast of the Wills, finding ATG. There may be some folks that don't know who David and Timothy are and don't know who As Father and Son are. So will you give me, either one of you, I don't care who goes, give us a little rundown, give us a breakdown of who As Faz is and what it is that you guys do.
So, me and my dad, David, started out when I was, incapable of full sentences. Started out with Star Wars.
And now I'm incapable of full sentences.
Right? Yeah. No, it's fine. It's always been part of my life. And then I've told this joke before. Like I always felt like what happened when I was born is Dad brought. Like we came home, brought me home, sat down on the couch and turned Star Wars on. In turn, I got to literally do that with my son when he was born in 2020. And so it's always been part of, like, we just always had a conversation about Star Wars going. And for like years, Dad was going, we need to like put a camera on ourselves and record ourselves having these conversations as father and son. That's what we'll call it. And it kind of kicked off from there. So we've done some video essays, especially like in the build up to like Rise of Skywalker. We've done some live reactions to things. We've done some video game streams, and then we went missing for like 5 months because we had like a schedule planned out to do a whole bunch of things, and then we had some personal things popped up, and then the holidays, and then I bought a house and moved, and so we haven't had time for this. So again, I say I've really been looking forward to this.
This is a big deal for us. This is like, we're back, it's whether you guys missed us or not, we've missed doing this.
Absolutely. Well, and so let's do this. And like I said, that's such a great, summation of the things that y'all do. But David, talk a little bit about, I have kids. I have 4 girls. I talk about that all the time. My oldest daughter, one of the twins, is my Star Wars kid. Like, she's my buddy. She's the one that for the last 7 weeks got up at 5:30 in the morning before school on Wednesday so we could watch Boba Fett before she went to school, because she knew that I wouldn't wait for her to get out of school to watch it. But talk about the opportunity, not only to bring your son into a Star Wars fandom that you obviously had for a long time and was a part of your life, but to have those conversations and to turn that into, an opportunity to record it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up watching Star Wars because they came out when I was 7, and I got to see the original movies all in the theater, which is exciting. And then when Timothy was really little was when the special editions came out. And Timothy, did I take you to at least one of those? I can't remember.
Yeah.
I know I took you to the Phantom Menace when it came out, because by then you were 6, but you were still pretty little when the special editions came out. So
97 would have been the 20th anniversary of the original. And I got to go. I don't know if the special editions came out that year or not. I think it was, but yeah, we went to see it. Yeah. That's actually one of my earliest memories of going to a movie theater, is going to see the original A New Hope in the theater.
So he had already seen them at home.
Sure.
I did start him. I didn't start him the day he got home from the hospital, but that is a great way. I love the way he tells that story.
Parenting.
But that's only because his mother wouldn't let you, right?
Pretty much, yeah. So, but I started him maybe sooner than she would have liked. But it so just it's always been there. It's always been since ever, since I was little. It was always there for me and my brother. And I was Han, my brother was Chewie, and then we had a friend that was Luke. But then as Timothy was getting of age to where I could buy him stuff, and he was old enough to get him lightsabers and blasters and all the action figure play sets and stuff. I mean, I say every once in a while I'll post on Twitter, a picture of us when we were young, when he was little, and I'm lightsaber fighting with him, or a picture of me when I was 10, holding my Han blaster. Well, now that Han blaster, I gave it to him and he played with it. I had broken it pretty much back in the 80s, so it didn't matter. But so having Timothy and just him being this person that as he got older and older, we just started really having conversations that we could connect on even deeper, more than just playing out in the yard, just really talking about what Star Wars means to us and the deeper connections. And that's what I love about your show and how you treat Star Wars like a sacred text, because that's how Timothy and I will talk about it sometimes. And our wives are both like, oh my gosh, here we go again. But it's
again. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just like, we love digging deep and finding all of the deeper meanings and things. And even for me, looking into what we're going to talk about tonight, I thought of something I really hadn't thought of before. And that's something I want to talk about later. And I'm just, I'm excited. So it's,
and that's been, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Yeah, I was going to say, just for me with these canon studies, and I love that you said it, every time I do this with any of these movies, I end up finding some other thread or some other thing that I go, just like you said, like I hadn't really thought that much about it. And part of that, to be perfectly honest, is painted in the light of the sequel trilogy, which we didn't have when I saw these movies the first time, the prequel trilogy, which we didn't have when I saw these movies the first time, in Disney TV, which we certainly didn't have. There's still threads that show up. There's, we can even talk about it a little bit, because by the time this comes out, Book of Boba will have long since been over. So there's not spoilers here, but like Luke Yoda moments that compare, Luke Grogu moments that compare to Luke Yoda moments that compare to, all down the line. And so I love that is, a thread for you guys. And I also think it's just incredibly special that you are indeed a father and son. And that is such a huge theme in that is Star Wars. It's the story of a father and son, and it's the story of that redemption and the relationships. And especially, like you said, with Jedi, and we'll get into it in a minute, that relationship to me was more, and I don't have sons, I have daughters, but it was still, as a parent, that relationship and those interactions, especially in the last 20 to 40 minutes of the movie, hit me in a completely different way than they ever have before.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was funny you said that about thinking of Return of the Jedi in terms of now having the prequel and sequel trilogies and all of the Disney TV era and everything. Because I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about and what I wanted to say for this tonight. And I was like, well, do we talk, if we're treating it like a sacred text, do we talk about it in 1983 terms, or do we talk about it in 2022 terms? Because there are two different ways of looking at that. When in 1983 it's over, versus we've got more now and we've got even more context to what comes after. And it's like, you can't, already I'm digging into it. Like, I can't talk about one without the other, because it is all one big connected thing, and it's always been that way, and we've always been able to get that passionate about it. And I think, for us, the father-son dynamic and just that relationship always made it personal, and always made talking about Star Wars personal and playing it personal, because the core conflict of Return of the Jedi comes down to a father-son relationship, and so that's always made the movie really personal for us.
No doubt.
And I had the realization. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think you're exactly right. And I think it doesn't even matter whether it is prequel time, whether it is, whatever the other time is, because we get the opportunity, as Framey said in our live chat, Star Wars is a bottomless well for anybody that's willing to dig in. So what it is in 1983 when it came out is not what it is as it continues to come out in 2022. And that's the beauty of story. And if we look at even, from a narrative standpoint, in the sacred text, sacred story, the story of our lives, it's still being written. It's still going. It's still continuing. And so there's a great, there's a beauty in that same thing too. David, what
and
were
that's
you going to say?
the realization that I had while watching the Book of Boba Fett was, and I've kind of had this realization before because Disney bought the property, and it's gonna go on. But I really had the realization that Star Wars is going to outlive me now. And before I never thought it would, and now I think of my grandson and all of the Star Wars that he's going to learn and know, and all of the stuff we know. But even beyond, there's Star Wars is not going away. And I think that's beautiful and wonderful and sad at the same time that there's going to be a time when I'll not be around and Star Wars will. And that's great though for my grandson and his kids. So I don't know if it sounds silly, but we're leaving a legacy of Star Wars, but that's what we're here to talk about tonight, about the good things that you can find in Star Wars that you can leave as a legacy.
Without a doubt. Well, and so that sets me up kind of for the next question that I tend to ask with our guests, and especially specific to each canon study that we do. And I'll ask you, David, first. What are your earliest memories of Return of the Jedi? Do you remember the first time you saw it? Do you have anything that's tied? And what I love about this dynamic right here is that we already know it's going to be two very specific, different scenarios, because being father and son, age, that kind of thing. I'm trying not to focus on the fact that I am actually old enough that I could be Timothy's dad. But for you, Return of the Jedi, what were your earliest memories that go with that?
So when I think Return of the Jedi, I was 13, and that's an age where you're really, are you still a kid, and are you going to do those kid things? You're a teenager, or am I supposed to do teenage things? But I was always of the mindset, Star Wars is life, and I'm never going to outgrow Star Wars. So me and my brothers, my brother and our best friend, I know we went and saw it in this great theater that no longer exists here in Little Rock. And it was a big, huge dome, and it only had one screen, almost as big as an IMAX screen. And one of the best memories I have of Empire Strikes Back was seeing that at that screen. It was so big that when they do the snow speeder going looking for Han and Luke, you lost your stomach. As a kid, it was like a roller coaster ride. But I remember the Return of the Jedi, sitting there, fingernails digging into the seat as Luke, as Luke was in that moment when the Emperor is telling him, I feel your anger, strike me down, whatever. And I'm 13 and I'm saying out loud, don't do it, Luke, don't give in to the dark side. No, I didn't care. I mean, if the emotions were, you can tell I'm having trouble framing sentences because that's how emotional I felt about it then. And I can still remember it. It was just gripping the seat going, is Luke going to give him to the dark side? And then he kind of does when he takes the lightsaber and goes to strike him down, and those blades cross. And of course, you're expecting a great battle. So as a 13-year-old, all of those scenes, I don't want to jump ahead to what we're going to talk about, but all of those things, that's what I remember. Everything about it. I didn't even care about the Ewoks. A lot of people didn't like teddy bears in their Star Wars, but I laughed all that stuff off because I was, like I said, still 13 and still a kid, and really excited to just accept, hey, this is it. This is the end of Star Wars as far as we knew. And I was all in. So yeah, good memories, always good memories.
Oh, without a doubt. Well, and so then we juxtapose that against Timothy, and you kind of said it already, but the special editions were out. And so I would assume that probably your earliest memory, well, no, because you did say that you watched them at home, that you had them on, probably VHS at that point. What is your earliest Return of the Jedi memories? Remember seeing it the first time, any of that kind of stuff?
The one, I don't want to call it a regret, but like the one thing that I wish could be different about the way that I grew up with Star Wars is I don't have memories of seeing the original trilogy for the first time, because it was just always there. And that's not a bad thing. And that's the way it's going to be for my kid. I can't get around that. Like, there's part of me that's like, pick a trilogy, and that's just the one that he grows up with, for the first couple of years. And then when he's old enough, he can like have his first experience with the rest of them in a way that he'll remember them. But I have no idea. That's not going to happen. But for me, it was just always there. And so it's really more like sensory memories of recognizing how incredible different sequences were. And so I have memories of sometimes I would watch it just to see Jabba's palace, just to see the entire opening sequence, and that was like what I was in it for. And I don't start a Star Wars if I'm not going to finish it. And my wife loves to like put on movies, and she'll watch like 15 minutes of a 2.5 hour long movie and be like, "Yeah, I'm good." And I'm like, "No, we started an experience. We have to finish it. We have to finish this in one sitting. That's what the filmmakers intended." But then sometimes I would put it on because I wanted to see the speeder bike chase, and then sometimes I was in it, for the whole thing. But like specifically, like my memories around Return of the Jedi are, and Dad, you can correct me if I get any details wrong here because I'm known to do that. But Mom was working nights at one point shortly after my sister was born. Mm-hmm, she was working night shifts for a little bit, and I have memories of, I think she probably would have been asleep at that point. And we would turn the lights out in the house. And I had I had gotten for my birthday the collection of lightsabers. And I mean, they're bigger than I am at this point. But we would turn all the lights out in the house and reenact the lightsaber duel at the end. And I'm telling you, I was 5, 6, every line of dialogue. If Dad misplaced the or like an and, like I would correct him. I was directing at that point already. Like I
he's not wrong.
Every line, I knew the amount of time that should pass between lines. If he jumped the gun, I would be like, no, you have to wait. Like I knew every line, every moment, every beat, every pause, like bits of the choreography, and like I'm 5. And I'm sure, looking back on it, it probably wasn't that professional, but it felt that way,
I hadn't thought about us doing that in so long, son, but that's such a great memory. But as the parent in that scenario, I was always so nervous we were going to break something. We were going to knock a lamp over because we were swinging for everything.
And we had a ceiling fan that was like way up, and it was like, it was way up top. Like we've got kind of a vaulted ceiling situation. The ceiling fan kind of hung down, but it was still low. But there were chains with like, probably fake, but they looked like marble balls on them that you would pull like to adjust the fan or the light or whatever. And I was too short to reach them, but my lightsaber wasn't. And I remember I would hit, and the glass casings around the bulbs. I don't think we ever broke one, but I remember the worst, like the only thing that would pause the momentum is you would whack one of those and just like see that ball fly up and like jangle against like the ceiling fan blades, and you're like, oh gosh, this is it, we've broken it, Mom's gonna kill us. And it was just our secret.
For the fallout,
right? It was just our secret, like Mom can't know, Mom can never know. But like those are my memories of Return of the Jedi.
Honey, if you're watching, we never said that. We never kept.
That's right. No, we would never. Well, and there's a part of me, of course, in the male lizard part of my brain also goes to like, well, those things would have been perfect training remotes. Like you should have been in there with that lightsaber.
Exactly.
Having I'm not saying that they did, Mrs. Timothy's mom, but I'm just saying, the opportunity is there.
Yeah. Those are my first memories of Return of the Jedi. And again, bringing it back, and this will be, I'm sure, what we get into, but like the father-son dynamic and the core, what that did for me, that being my favorite part, and the part that we acted out and the part that we went through, like as my mind is developing and learning to understand what the story is and what the significance of Darth Vader being Luke's father and what Luke's goal in Return of the Jedi is, like it made it really serious for me and really real for me, especially when Dad would get dramatic and lay on the floor and be doing the dying breath, dialogue, and like it was all there, man.
We did it all.
I love that.
And I do it again.
In a heartbeat. And you're going to do it again because you have grandchildren and you're going to be able to have those same opportunities. So the other question that I ask, I love to find out everybody's. It used to be when I did this show, it was always just Star Wars origin story. And I've done that with both of you guys on the show. But I love with the canon studies that I get to focus it on those specific movies, because as we continue to move forward through prequels and sequels and all that stuff, those stories are going to be so different than just how did you come to Star Wars? So I love that y'all shared that with me. The other question that I ask, and I've added this one, I think even since the Empire run, is what is your Star Wars spiritual experience? And it's super personal, super individualized. And I always kind of couch it descriptively as a time in your life when Star Wars hits you as something bigger. It could be the first time you saw something. It could be a toy. It could be an experience. It could be a shared moment. Whatever it is, we've all had a moment as deep cover Star Wars fans where it hit us as something more than just a movie. And I love finding out from my guest, what is your Star Wars spiritual experience? So Timothy, we're going to start with you, and it is kind of on the spot, although I may have given you a heads up for this. I don't remember, but what is your Star Wars spiritual experience?
It's so funny. I've been thinking about this, for the last couple of weeks, and like listening to the ones that came before, and you've asked everybody this question, and I've been like, I've got to have an answer for that when he asks me. And all day today, I was supposed to narrow down my answer, and you asked it just now, and I was like, oh, I did forget something, didn't I? No, gosh, it's like spiritual experience. It's hard to pick one because it's meant something different to me at different stages in my life. And so, as a kid, it really was, it was the thing that like my family bonded over, like especially me and dad. And then when my sister got old enough to play, and then mom was never a big nerd like us, but she still enjoyed going to see the movies and things like that. And I remember the midnight premiere of Revenge of the Sith being a big deal for me and dad both, because I remember we both kind of had a, that's it, Star Wars is over experience together. But honestly, I think spiritual experience for me, and it's not Return of the Jedi related, but at the same time it kind of is.
That's all right.
I think it was walking out of The Last Jedi.
Okay.
And it was as a grown married person, with, I'm in my 20s. I'm still in my 20s, a couple more months, holding on to that. But like walking out of that and having been through Star Wars is over, it's never coming back, to getting The Force Awakens, and like that excitement that came with that, and like how excited my dad got, which you might be about to talk about, I don't know. But like getting to see Luke Skywalker on the big screen again, and then have him be not what I thought he was going to be, not what I wanted him to be, but exactly what I needed him to be. Yes. It made me feel, it's like through the course of the movie, because the whole plot of the film is, finding your teacher not who you expect him to be, and he's gone through this experience that's traumatized him, and he's not the Luke Skywalker we want him to be until the end of the movie, when he again does what Luke Skywalker does. Things go wrong, he runs away from them, he learns a lesson, and then he comes back better than he was before. And that has been what Luke has always been for me. And getting to have that experience as an adult made me feel like a kid again, but it meant more because I was an adult. And I think The Last Jedi probably would be the one that nails that in.
Well, I'll just go ahead and let everybody know right now, I've made a mental note that when we get to Last Jedi Canon Studies, you'll be on the list, because
cool.
You're singing my song, you're preaching to the choir. Like,
I can talk about The Last Jedi all day long. I mean, I can talk about Star Wars all day long, but I could
maybe the biggest existential crisis I have in my life at the moment might be how I'm going to deal with Last Jedi as a canon study when I eventually get to it, because
just bring me.
Empire is my favorite Star Wars movie, but Last Jedi has moments where it could take over. Like, it's number 2 for sure, and Star Wars and Jedi, Return of the Jedi, are right there behind it because of nostalgia and connection and all those things. But like, I don't have enough words or time, and we're not going to do it tonight, to talk about how much I love Last Jedi. So for you to say that, because again, the different level, I'm already spoiling it and getting ahead. So put that in your calendar for down the road.
Okay, cool. But David, if you need help, just bring me in through the whole thing. I will be there.
You're gonna be my like on the spot call in. Yeah, you're gonna be the guy, the man in the chair.
I got you
to bring in some Spider-Man parlance.
I got
you. So David, for you,
so for me, spiritual experience. Prior to 2015. It would have been the story I told about the Return of the Jedi, and just being there as a 13-year-old, and just all of the emotions and the sense of getting the bad guy to be redeemed. That was so spiritual.
Yep.
But then The Force Awakens happened, and the trailer was just so amazing. And then the opening night with my whole family, my wife, who loves Star Wars, she's just not a nerd. It's not going to play it like we do, but or talk about it as much. But my wife was there, my son was there, my daughter was there, My future daughter-in-law was there, right, Timothy?
Mm-hmm.
Or were y'all married?
We were married at that point.
No,
we were married at that point.
You
yeah.
were?
Okay.
Wow. Gosh,
yeah.
y'all have been married a long time. So anyway, the family was there, and that was the experience of Star Wars is back. And that feeling that I had and the emotions that I had of we're all enjoying a Star Wars together as a family in the theater, and it's brand new. That was like, and then the Last Jedi thing Timothy's talking about, yes, I feel that too, but it's just, there's something about the whole Star Wars is back feeling that to me, spiritually, it just means so much as my family because we can enjoy it. And sometimes The Force Awakens is almost our go-to family. Let's just watch Star Wars. Okay, Force Awakens. Yeah. And it used to be probably Empire or even the original Star Wars. But recently I had the opportunity to get to watch the original trilogy rather with one of my cousin's daughters is about the same age as my daughter, and so we had her over, and she had never seen Star Wars in her life, which I need to get on to my cousin about that. But she didn't know anything about it, and we got to watch the original trilogy with her, and then up through Attack of the Clones. We're catching up, so we got to get her to Revenge of the Sith. But just that whole feeling of us getting to do Star Wars as a family when The Force Awakens came out, that's just like a special thing to me, and I'll never,
no doubt,
I just never forget it.
Let me tell you, y'all have never seen a 45-year-old man turn into a 10-year-old in front of your eyes before, but I have. Honestly, that might be like second place for me, is not even my own experience. And I think that's why I had to pick The Last Jedi. The experience of watching my dad, having talked about how much he loved Star Wars as a kid with me my whole life, I got to see what David looked like as a kid, as an adult, like when The Force Awakens hit.
And listen, I love lots of franchises. I do. But Star Wars is the only one that can make me feel like that.
I agree with you completely. It's something special. And that's why I love that question. And I love that literally every single person has a different answer. You talked about Mark Newbold earlier in the episode that I did with him. And, his related to a time in his life where he was dealing with grief, and Star Wars was a part of the thing that allowed him to be on the other side of that and deal with that. And so, it can be what we knew as a kid. It can be, it covers so many different things. You talking about Last Jedi, like I have moments very specifically that relate to Last Jedi. I also relate to you, Timothy, and I know, David, you're the same way. I can't pick one. Like there isn't one spiritual moment. That's why I sit in my garage every week and make an internet TV show about Star Wars because it has affected me. It has affected me on that deep of a level.
Yeah.
And it is something that has real world application, which is what we're about to get into and, unpack it a little bit more. But it is so fun to get to sit in my chair and listen to my guests on a regular basis share what theirs are, and especially for the two of you, because you are actually father and son, to see how those things, they hover in and out of each other's orbits and connect, and it's really special. So thank you for sharing that with me and with all of our listeners.
Thank you for letting us.
Thank you for letting us. Thank you for giving us the chance to do it.
Yeah,
absolutely. So now we get into the canon study. We get into kind of the meat of what this whole thing is about. And unlike previous weeks where it was a certain assigned set of minutes, we'll get that right. We get the whole movie, and we're doing the big picture overview. We're looking at Return of the Jedi. Yes, sir.
Like what movie? I thought we were specifically just talking about this little book. Is that not? I mean, this is what I did my homework on. Was I supposed to watch a movie?
I'm sorry. Maybe I gave you bad information, but yes, that Return of the Jedi storybook.
This thing right here is
what's the closest almost thing I have in reach?
Almost as good as the movie, guys. I'm telling you, I did read it, and I was like, I don't need to watch the movie, even though I recently just did. This was good.
Yep. Sorry. That was me with the records that I played on my Fisher Price record player. That also every time R2D2 made the beep, you turned the page. Which one of those I bought at Celebration when I went to Orlando in 2017. And I don't have that book, David, but of course you saw me and Timothy made a joke about it because I was looking around thinking, could I get it?
Yeah, I'm trying to find,
but it's within arm's reach. But I have the little stack of the Star Wars storybooks that I found at the thrift store not too long ago.
Well, my daughter actually got me this one at an estate sale, and it is literally copyright 1983. But she found it last year before at an estate sale. I mean, and it's great. I mean, for as old as it is, it's great. Oh, whoops! Yeah, so as old as it is in great shape. Is it showable?
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's working. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and mostly this is just us making Timothy feel jealous that his things are still in boxes. So.
I've literally got a box behind me that it's 2 boxes. It's Timothy's Nerd Stuff box 1, Timothy's Nerd Stuff box 2. They're right behind me, but I can't get to them.
Yeah.
Well, Nick, he apparently doesn't love you, Nick, because he didn't wear the helmet.
See, we tried.
It was downstairs. Honestly, I was going to have it on, like just sitting here waiting for you. I was going to have it on. And then when I took it off, I was going to have the Spider-Man mask on. And then I was going to be like, okay. And then like black my screen out and then put the Batman mask on.
That's too much work.
It was too much effort than I had in me to exert at 8:30 at night.
I wore the shirt. Okay.
It's those deep cover internet, Twitter text conversations.
This is my favorite Star Wars sweater. It's my favorite sweater just in general. I wore it just for you.
Fantastic sweater. I love that.
All right, sorry, we've nerded out on some. I digressed. I
trying to get us on task. Stay on target.
Task.
That's what you get for asking us to come on a show.
You get what you pay for.
Task is, that's a side mission. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna dig into our canon study of Return of the Jedi, and like I said, we are looking at the big picture. We've got the whole movie in front of us. So the first question that I always ask, and we have 3 kind of guiding questions that we use. And the first question is, what is the text telling us? And for me, the way I always explain this is the literal interpretation. What are the literal big things? And of course, we could go, scene by scene and describe the whole movie. But what are kind of the big rock literal things that you get when you look at Return of the Jedi? And we'll go with David first.
Literally, this movie is telling us that Luke is trying to get one up on Han so that he doesn't owe him anything else, Junior. So he goes and saves Han off of out of Jabba's palace and off of Tatooine. And then he ends up saving Han before he gets roasted by Ewoks. So I think Luke now is either tied or has one up on Han. So I think that's what isn't that the crux of the story? Did I get that right?
It's even because that's twice.
That's twice. Okay.
That's 2 you owe me,
Junior. He said that's 2 you owe me, Junior. So he saved him off Jabba and he saved him. Well, I mean, and then
that's what the text is literally telling us. You weren't expecting that answer.
So to be serious, well, I was kind of serious, but no, but to be serious though, the whole package as a whole, wow, I think that what the Return of the Jedi is telling us is in the title itself. There's a return, and that no matter where you've gone, whether you got captured by an evil gangster Hutt, or you fell down into the deepest, darkest part of being in the dark side of the Force, there's a return. And that's what, to me, the theme of it is literally telling us, is that someone is going to return. Obviously, the Jedi is going to return, but also the Jedi Luke returned to save his friend. Because the theme of the story, I think, is not just return, but redemption in return.
Yes. Without a doubt. Okay. And Timothy, for you, what is the text telling you? What are your kind of big literal things that stand out?
Boiling it down to one thing, they made it.
Okay.
Thinking of this as the close to a trilogy, the close to the story of Han, Luke, and Leia coming together, and what the immediate, coming together to fight the Emperor, and fight Vader and fight the Empire as a whole. They made it. They did it. It leaves thinking of the final moment, of all of them standing together in the celebration. They made it. They got through. And that's a big takeaway from a story that over the course of, what was it, 8-9 years from when the first movie came out to the Return of the Jedi hitting, and then it's several years worth of time in the story for those characters, and then the Empire has been around for, you know, almost 25 years at that point. Like, all of those things, you keep lining it up in terms of like what's that moment of them looking and all smiling together before, you know, the credits roll. They made it. They did it. Mm-hmm. They did what they set out to do. And again, I'm not going to go here. And this is what I was literally doing like a practice run in my car earlier to make sure I didn't go here. But like, where that wants to lead me is, well, what does the sequel trilogy mean? And we'll get to that later. Bring me back. We can go there later. But the sequel trilogy means there's more. And that's my favorite thing about treating this like it's a sacred text, is there is always more. And there's more to that story. Mm-hmm. But in that moment, whether it's 1983 or 2022, they made it. In that moment, the Return of the Jedi closes, and these characters, these people did it. And I focused on that one specifically because Dad took mine, and he focused on the Return. And that was what I had actually, like, I've got notes right here that were like, Return, focus on Return. And then Dad did it.
We didn't talk before this, so we have not traded any notes at all.
I like that. It adds to the excitement and the adventure of it all.
And I will say that I don't think I, as a 13-year-old, caught that the returning Jedi was technically Anakin. I always just thought it meant Luke was somehow becoming a Jedi. But as I got older, I realized, oh wow, the Jedi that returned was Darth Vader. And that's just your brain as a kid, just like, oh, maybe.
And it creates an interesting moment, and we talked about this earlier. When we saw it the first time, there was nothing else. When we see it another time, you know, there's sequels, prequels, TV, all that kind of stuff. And so I spent some time at one point a couple of weeks ago when Luke goes back to Dagobah and he's talking to Yoda, and Yoda dies, and then he's in the jungle, and Obi-Wan shows back up, and they have the conversation, you know, Yoda spoke of another, and they have that whole back and forth. And of course, Luke says Leia. And, you know, and I think when Yoda's dying, he does say there's another Skywalker. You know, he kind of chokes out the word Skywalker. But you can't help but hear, you know, no, there is another. And even to jump into The Last Jedi, you know, the Jedi, it's time for the Jedi to end. But now we're going, well, there's a Grogu out there somewhere. There's an Ahsoka out there somewhere. There's an Ezra somewhere. Like, there's these other things that we know about that, you know, again, the ever-growing narrative of the story, and what is the Force, and what is the Force, how does it really work? Like, it sets your mind listening to those lines and deliveries in just a slightly little bit different way.
Yeah. And also Jedi Masters can be wrong.
Jedi Masters can absolutely be wrong.
With more context.
Or they can use that whole certain point of view thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, and it's that was what I wanted to touch on with the idea of the return. Like, it was the same for me. I was grown before it really occurred to me that the Return of the Jedi doesn't just mean Luke. And that's my favorite part about that title. I think Return of the Jedi and The Last Jedi have the best titles of the entire saga. Like, I think they're tied because the word Jedi is both singular and plural.
Correct.
And in the same
George
way,
Lucas, you genius, you.
I know. Both films and both titles have a whole lot of implications that come with them, and with the idea of the Return of the Jedi. So it is the Return of the Jedi through Luke, the concept of the Jedi returned through Luke, but also the very end of the movie. The last thing that Luke sees before we cut to that final shot of everybody is Ben and Yoda and Anakin all standing together, and and he is now the Jedi. He's carrying on the legacy of the Jedi. The Jedi as a group are together, but then, and what you were just talking about with how the more time goes on and the more Star Wars that we get, thank God, the more context we have added into those things. And one of my favorite things is that in the comics and in some of the books, Vader, when he thinks of Anakin Skywalker, calls him the Jedi.
Right.
And so now you watch Return of the Jedi with that in mind. And when Vader hurls Palpatine over the ledge, calls Luke son, makes that choice, the Jedi has returned. Vader is completely gone, and the Jedi has returned. And it's so good. It's so good. It's so good.
It absolutely is so good. I jotted down a couple things, and from my literal standpoint, one of the things that stood out to me more in this movie than previous times when I watched it, and again, it could be age, stage, life, any number of reasons why it hits me in the way it does. The theme and the idea of, well, and I guess maybe this is more of the inspirational part, but like we see so much uncertainty with so many characters in this particular film. And it starts early, and I've talked about this over the last couple of weeks. When Luke shows up to Jabba's palace at the beginning, like he's confident, he's dark, he's broody, he's a Jedi master, But as soon as he falls into the rancor pit, like the switch flipped, and he was like scrambling and nervous.
Sorry to cut you off, but when y'all got into that in that episode, I was like, "Oh my gosh, he does!" Sorry, I loved that. Sorry, I meant to tell you that earlier.
So he kind of goes to scrambling. He's back on his heels, but then he gets through that moment, survives, throws the rock, does the thing, and then he's back on the sail barge, and all of a sudden he's confident, cool Luke again. Just stick close to Chewie and Lando. I've got this under control. It's whatever. You have Han being uncertain with Luke and Leia in that relationship because Han's a little bit of a dum-dum and hasn't put it all together yet. But also you sense it in the uncertainty with Vader. And that's kind of one of the big things that stood out to me as much more in this movie is like the pauses that they do, whether it's intentional when they filmed it or whether it's how I interpret it, because, half of art is, our interpretation. But even from the very beginning, when he shows up on the Death Star 2 and he's here to tell him that the Emperor's come to put you back on schedule, when the Emperor shows up, your thoughts go to Skywalker. Like all those moments, there's so many points where there's a pause before Vader responds that feeds that uncertainty that he is emotionally compromised early in this movie, maybe earlier than we think he is. It didn't happen when Luke's getting electrocuted by the Emperor. It happened before that. And the big moment for me, it happened is when they're on the little gantry on Endor, when Luke turns himself in and they're walking down the thing and he calls him father and he gives the line about, so you've accepted that, whatever. Like that's when the turn happens, in my opinion. Like it hits him then because the recognition in his son of him as his father changed him in that moment. And the rest of it was just, the things that toppled the sandcastle after the fact. But the uncertainty and all of that has stood out to me more so than it did in previous viewings of this.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something too that I've always loved about, again, the father-son dynamic and the idea of like playing out those scenes and memorizing the dialogue with my dad and the father and son language that's used. And it's very pointed and very targeted toward the idea of parents and their children. And now with the benefit of the prequels and knowing that everything Anakin ever did, he did just to try to save the people he loved. And the Jedi told him not to save the people he loved and to let them go. And then you see Luke rushing off to save Han and Leia because he loves them. And it's, there's so much, poetry and rhyming going on there.
And I'm sorry, Tim, if I can interject, what you're saying, Nick, that's kind of when it flipped for Vader. It's because his son has acknowledged him and has called him father, but he also says how he can sense the conflict in him. He knows there's still good in him. The Emperor hasn't driven it from you fully.
Yes.
And that is what you're saying, Nick, is that's when Vader maybe didn't know he had the conflict, but it's been there. And then knowing that his son is accepting him as father. So the conflict probably did start after realizing there was another Skywalker, pre-Empire between Star Wars, A New Hope and Empire. But right there in that moment, when Luke calls him father, so you have accepted. I mean, that is the moment where the conflict Luke was feeling and the goodness that the Emperor hadn't fully driven from him was there. And it's a spark. And that's all it takes to start a fire is the tiniest little spark.
Yeah. Well, I know that me and Dad have discussed this, and I want to say that I may have talked about this when I was on with you the first time, but talking about Vader, and I don't want to just completely rehash it, but
that's all right.
The Vader comic run, that was about like the moments immediately after Revenge of the Sith. There are sequences, and my favorite pieces of those comics are Vader meditating, and you see in his meditation it's all like chaos and fire and, you know, a hellscape, but you see the light in him, and it's depicted as they look like butterflies. And the more corrupt Vader gets, and the more disturbing, and the more like he gives in and is just committing, you know, mass genocides on planets and all sorts of things, like the light is snuffed and snuffed and snuffed until they're all but gone. And to me, my headcanon is that the moment he hears the name Luke Skywalker for the first time, it's like an eruption of light all over again. Like he's right. Snuffed it out. He's thought it's gone. And the moment he hears Luke Skywalker and the implication of Padme's children survived, all of that wakes it back up. And from that point on up to hearing Luke call him father for the first time, it's like trying to keep that light at bay. And then as soon as he's face to face with him, talking not as, I know something you don't know, I'm about to cut your hand off and surprise you, really, you know, I've got a real big nasty surprise for you. He's still like relishing the dark when he's in Empire. But when you get to that talk on Endor, he calls him dad for the first time. Like,
and even Vader says, "It's too late for me." Son.
He calls him.
There's that moment that he calls him son,
like Darth Vader. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, yep. It's because Vader's gone, and he's in denial. That it's the same again. Poetry. It's the go to Rise of Skywalker. Ben seeing Han, and he's like, "Your son is dead." No, Kylo Ren is dead.
Yep.
And it's the same thing. It's that same. Yeah. We could keep going anyway.
and we'll come back to those moments. So the first question is always our literal interpretation. What is the text telling us? The second question that I like to use for this is, what is the text asking of us? And I always frame this as, what are the inspirational things that you are being given? Normally I say in these minutes, but in this movie, where is the inspiration that you're pulling out of it? Timothy, we'll go with you first.
The inspiration, and I know this will be Dad's as well, but it's redemption. It's that redemption is possible for anybody. And then your third is always like, what's the challenge to us, or what's the takeaway? How do we, the practical application, right?
The practical, that's right.
Those go hand in hand. But in terms of if the literal thing we're seeing is the Jedi have returned in all of those different ways. And then, our heroes made it, and they did it. They made it because of redemption, not just Vader's, but because Han is very different from the guy we met in the booth, on Tatooine, to the guy that he is standing there, in an Ewok village celebration with his friends and with people that he's joined himself to as a found family. And Luke is very different from a kid looking up at the sky wanting more to being the Jedi. And even Leia. I mean, Leia is a constant through everything, but she's found, like, we meet her alone. The first time we see Leia, she's hiding. She's working for the mission, and she is always working for the mission. But I don't want to. It's hard to say that Leia is ever on equal ground with anyone. She is always standing taller than anyone in the room. But even she's given herself over to having family, and they've all grown and they've all changed and matured. And then obviously Anakin, like redemption, the idea. Being that anybody can be redeemed from who you currently are, you can always become something more.
Absolutely. I love that. David, what about you? I know that Timothy said he stole yours, so.
No, that was good. For me, it's telling us, and the practical application is that those that we care about are worth rescuing from whatever trouble they've gotten themselves into.
Absolutely.
Whether it was Han because of the bounty hunter and then Jabba, or if it's someone that you care about that everyone else thinks is unredeemable, aka Darth Vader, that those that you care about, they're worth trying to save.
Right.
And there is a scripture that says that no greater love has any person than to lay your life down for your friends. And Luke was willing to lay his life down because he even said it when he's there with the Emperor and Vader, that we'll all be dead soon. I'm going to be dead too. You're going to be dead, but my friends are down there and they're going to accomplish this. And of course, then the Emperor flips the script on him and it's a trap and all that. But the willingness that Luke had to leave the moon of Endor to go with Vader, thinking in his mind all along, they're going to blow this thing up and I'm going to be on there with them. And if I can save my father, fine. But if not, he'll die with me. I'll die, but my friends will be saved. But at the same time, his other mission was, I'm going to save my father. Mm-hmm. So that to me is so deep and so spiritual. Getting back to the spirituality of this whole sacred text of Star Wars, is that even the unredeemable, if you care about them enough, they're worth fighting for. Someone like the Emperor, I don't know. I think there's always going to be someone who is not redeemable, but nobody cared about the Emperor. Anakin did, and look what it cost him. Everything. Yeah, but his son comes back to rescue him.
And that comes back to, and certainly another, real world application that we see in some of that, which is, trauma and mental abuse. And, Anakin was purely a victim of the Empire. I mean, the Emperor, I'm sorry, not the Empire, the Emperor. Palpatine played him. Palpatine used everything he had because of what he knew, who he sensed that Anakin was. And, your mother, the fear of losing Padme, all the things. I mean, that was straight up manipulation. That was, mental abuse, which, again, has a very real world application to people that, we've all known people in our life who have been through similar situations and dealt with, those kinds of issues that caused them to stay in a bad situation. And, of course, we get the Star Wars Space Wizard version of that. But we still connect with it because you realize at its core, Anakin is a broken little boy. Like, did Anakin ever grow past a certain point where we lose him, maybe even in Attack of the Clones before we get to Revenge of the Sith? Like, at what point did his development as a he was fixated with Padme. That was his, she was his light. She was his guide and his beacon. But it creates a point where then it becomes those things get blocked out and he's driven by rage. He's driven by the revenge. He's driven by the misleading that he gets. And we see it in his turn in Revenge of the Sith. Like there's a little bit of that conflict there, but he has to, he feels like he has to do it at that point, which, that's even hitting me just even as you're saying that.
So I think that is the point of the crux of the movie when you're really talking about the deep spiritual aspect of it, is never give up on your loved ones. And what Luke did was something I liked this thought. I'm glad you're putting that up there, but I'm going to finish my thought here. Luke saw Vader with his own eyes, and then Vader later said, "Let me look on you with my own eyes." Luke saw Vader, but he didn't see Vader. He saw Anakin. So never give up. Look for that. And then, I'm going to let you read this.
And I love this. And this is why I love that we have such smart people that hang out and watch this show with us. Framey puts this comment in the chat, says, does this work as Luke rescuing Anakin from Vader? Can we separate the two people effectively for this conversation? And I think we can. That's, my gut tells me Anakin and Vader are two different people. And the opportunity for Luke to rescue his father from Darth Vader. He's not rescuing him from the Emperor. The Emperor is kind of, secondary / tertiary at this point. Like, it's Luke rescuing Anakin Skywalker, who is his father.
Absolutely.
So, I feel like you have a chime in for that.
I do, because I actually want to not disagree with it, but take the flip side of that. I think it works on both levels. I think it absolutely works. As I read that and I was like, oh, that's so good. Thinking of him rescuing Anakin from Vader as though Vader is a separate entity, but it also works on the spiritual level of it not being two separate people, of Vader being a choice, because Anakin gets on his knees and says, I pledge myself to your teaching.
Yes.
He chooses.
He made a choice. That's right.
Vader.
He did make a choice.
He makes that choice. And And I love that question, and I love that it does work on both levels, because once Vader takes over and Vader is killing the Jedi inside his soul, he's wiping him out. Vader is this terrible, horrible force that does terrible, horrible things. But Anakin, and Anakin is a victim of this thing. Palpatine names Vader. He comes up with that. And so to that extent, Vader is a separate thing from Anakin. But becoming that is something Anakin chooses. And what Luke is rescuing him from, you can take it either way you like it. You can take it that he's rescuing him from a separate entity, or rescuing him from his own choices. And that redemption and beyond redemption, and this goes to like the challenge to us, and like the next step of like, what do we take away? How do we put this into practical application? But the challenge of redemption is forgiveness. It's that you have to look at the horrible things someone has done and forgive them for it, whether or not they repent of it. You have to forgive them for it. And absolutely. That's what before Anakin has acknowledged any form of apology to Luke shows up calling him father. He doesn't show up calling him Vader. He doesn't show up saying, let's talk about all the people you've killed. Let's talk about all the horrible things you've done. He has taken the time between the discovery and that conversation. That whole conversation could have been how many people have you killed? How many planets have you, raised
justify
to the ground?
Yourself.
Like tell me how you can explain how that's okay because you did it for my mother, or whatever reason you thought it was good. And instead he shows up being a Jedi, but being better than what the Jedi were, where the Jedi would have shut off emotion completely. He's a Jedi, but he can also claim, yes, you are my father. And that's what I care about most. Because the Jedi, Obi-Wan and Yoda, want him to kill Vader. They only see Vader. Luke sees Anakin. And he, before Anakin has repented, he sees Anakin, and that is who he chooses to address. And I think that's so important to the idea of redemption and of forgiveness, that we don't live in a time where forgiveness is a default. And I mean, it never is, but it is so easy now to focus on the horrible things about just the world and the terrible, terrible people we've seen to do terrible things. And if we believe and tying this to something spiritual and growing up, another answer I could have given to what was my spiritual experience of Star Wars was Dad used Star Wars to teach me about spirituality. Like we would watch, and that's something that I loved growing up with those movies and with any movie, and that I do with my wife and that I want to do with our little boy, is watch a movie and then be like, okay, where do you see Jesus in that? Where do you see something of real spiritual value that we can apply to what our faith and how we believe? Like, where do you see something bigger than just the movie, bigger than just Star Wars in that? And I think the idea of redemption and forgiveness, and again, to take it to, please bring me back for The Last Jedi. No one's ever really gone.
Right.
No one's ever truly gone. And that is the crux of the spirituality of Return of the Jedi. Yeah.
And I want to interject what you were talking about with Luke and Vader, and Luke not coming and bringing up all of those things that he had done because he still saw the redeeming quality. But there was a moment that Luke was willing to say, oh no, you're not going there, when he realized that there was a sister. Yeah. And at that moment, Luke was like, oh wait, all bets are off now because I want to redeem you. But if you go after her, you got to die. That's when it snapped, and Luke was like, okay, I'm not letting that happen. And he did get a little emotional. He may have tapped into some dark side that he shouldn't have, but actually maybe he should have, because that's the way, unfortunately, he needed to get to that place to defeat Vader, accomplish his Jedi trials as he's becoming a Jedi, but also get to that, almost to the brink, and then realize, oh, no, I'm not going to kill him. He's not going to kill my sister because I just beat him. And now I'm going to prove to the Emperor, throw my lightsaber away, and I am a Jedi. Yep. But in that moment when he said, oh, you have a twin sister, that was when Luke was like, all bets are off now, Dad. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I love that moment because it's so real, and it's so full of passion, which is something the Jedi teach against, and it's the way that Palpatine corrupted Anakin, is with passion and with care. But it's he calls out in that moment. He stops seeing Anakin. He only sees Vader because Vader has threatened his sister, Anakin's
because he still had conflict in him. He was still conflicted at that moment.
He was still conflicted. But Luke does give in to that passion, and he does let the rage loose. And I mean, I don't know that's a great moment, and I don't think that moment would be half of what it is if it wasn't for John Williams' score over that, as the camera just does that slow pan across.
Dang it, you stole it from me.
I'm sorry. But like,
I was gonna say John Williams before you. Oh my gosh.
That is, I think, one of the best moments in Star Wars is when Luke lets go, because that moment is his trial. He is there, and now again, with the benefit of being 40 years later, we can look at everything we've gotten since. That's Anakin's "I have the power to save the one you love, you must choose." Exactly. That's the same moment. That's the same thing. And Luke has the temptation, with Anakin, it was stopping Mace and letting Palpatine kill him, and with this, he's giving in to that temptation, but he pushes through it. It's Galadriel looking into the mirror and seeing what would happen if she takes the ring. I love when Star Wars is Lord of the Rings. Like, it's temptation is something that everybody faces. The difference is how the difference between us is how we respond to it. No one is going to handle it perfectly. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory. Luke falls short. He gives in to hate. He lashes out. He goes too far, but he knows to stop. And I think, again, poetry, rhyming, cutting off Vader's hand, cutting off Mace Windu's hand. There's so much there, but he stops.
He stops, and that's the difference.
Yeah.
Now, I feel like we're a couple of tag team wrestlers here. Can I slide you in, Timothy? Let's tag team here. Let's get back to John Williams. If it's okay, Nick, I want to progress us forward past this moment to the next most touching Star Wars music. I cried in the theater. I could still cry every time I hear it. But Luke has dragged his father out to that shuttle. And he's about to try to get away, right? And as the helmet comes off, when he says, "I want to see you with my own eyes," and all that very tiny, I don't know if it's a violin plucking it out or something, but it's the Imperial March Darth Vader music is just the very ding, 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 ding. And I mean, I remember feeling that in the theater, and then every time watching it after, thinking, that's his music, but it's soft and gentle and sad, and he's dying, and his son says, "No, you can't die, and I'm gonna save you." And he says, "You already have." And then I never thought about this until we were gonna have this conversation, and thank you, Nick, for letting me invite us on this show. I had never thought about Vader's dying wish, Anakin's dying wish, when he knew now not only does he have a son, but he has a daughter, and his dying wish was, "Luke, tell your sister that you were right.
Yep.
You were right about me." He wanted to make sure that his daughter knew there was still good in him.
That's right.
Because wherever she was in the galaxy, because he knew who she was, then I'm sure he figured it out when he figured out sister. But he knew that Leia hated him. He tortured Leia.
Correct.
In that room on the Death Star. He wanted her to know there was still good in me. His dying wish.
Yes.
I'm sorry,
I think
I'm
for
getting
me, no, that's all right. I think for me, that cements and gives us the proof of his redemption, because his last thoughts weren't about him. His last thoughts were about someone else. His last thoughts were not even about Luke, who was there at his side, but he wants somebody else to know. His other child.
To know that the Emperor had not driven it from him fully.
Correct.
And
that's
bigger
still had that good.
We're allowed to do Book of Boba Fett spoilers, right?
Absolutely. Come on.
Yes.
Y'all, Luke and Ahsoka have met. We now know that they've had that conversation.
That's my biggest thing. And
that just takes it even a step further. Like all of the things that we know about Vader and how terrible Vader was, that the Clone Wars and the prequel trilogy and everything have now given us to know who Anakin was. We know how it just makes that redemption so much deeper. It makes it so much it gives it so much more depth and fulfillment. And it just, oh my gosh, we could keep going. You have to stop us or we won't.
Yeah, we did hijack the show. I noticed Framey saying, we've hijacked your show. No, sorry.
That's okay. That's why I knew this would be a good night. So, but yeah, and that there's so many things in that. And gosh, we're going to have to do Return of the Jedi Canon Study wrap up part 2. But some of those things that hit, obviously you said it about Luke and Ahsoka. I said last year after we got Ahsoka in the Jedi episode of Mandalorian, and then we got Luke in was it The Rescue? Is that what it's called? Whatever that last episode was called. We get both of them. We know it's a possibility. The only campaign pledge and promise that I wanted from anyone at Lucasfilm was 5 minutes of Luke telling Ahsoka, "You don't know he came back." He was telling that. We know they've had that.
I believe we'll see that in the Ahsoka series. I believe we will see that.
I think the potential is that it'll still be there, but it did hit me immediately. And I think I even said out loud, they've already talked about it.
They've had that conversation.
When they're standing there. But there was something also interesting in that moment, because, of course, she looks so much like your father, is what she says to him. But then when she leaves right after that, that uncertainty in Luke bubbles back up. And it's that, will I ever see you again? Like, he's just gotten her in his life. Like, we don't know really how long they've been connected and whatever, but like, it's that little kid feeling of like, wait, where are you going? Like, are you leaving? Like, are you coming back? Like, there was something in the way they did that it hit me in a certain way.
The life of Luke Skywalker is looking for validation from other people and then them leaving him.
Correct.
It starts with Ben. It happens with Han. It starts with, it keeps going his entire life. He gets Anakin back. Anakin's dead. He gets Yoda. Like, it keeps going. Ben Solo, his whole life. And then Rey shows up, and now maybe I can try and tell somebody a different way to do it. And then she takes off and leaves, and he realizes she's right. And then the only way to redeem his mistakes, again, talking about redemption. And again, this should be the Last Jedi conversation, but I'm here.
I was about to say, we've just gone into the Last Jedi canon.
Is for Luke to come back. And the point that Return of the Jedi, the impact that Return of the Jedi as a film leaves on the legacy of Star Wars. When you watch the prequels and you see the prequels are the story of the fall of Anakin, you end Revenge of the Sith with just this depression of, okay, I need to watch Winnie the Pooh or something to warm, just make myself feel a little cozier. But you see Luke hand it off to Owen and Beru and looking off into the sunrise, and there's hope because you remember, no, he comes back. And you watch Return of the Jedi, and it's, he's going to come back at the end of this. And you get the sequel trilogy, and it's all of these things fell apart, but they come back. They bring them back. They still get to redeem it. And that is Star Wars, is redemption.
Without a doubt. And I just want to throw in on my kind of big picture, one of my big picture inspirational moments, and I'm going to call out because Framey is just, they're hitting on all cylinders tonight. This comment from earlier: hope, but not for hope's sake. Hope without resilience is just folly for our heroes. The entire rebellion never backed down despite setback after setback. And then, of course, the line we love from the Force Awakens trailer: darkness rises and light to meet it. For me, this hits because, of course, Star Wars is about hope. And, if you listen to Around the Galaxy, Pete asked people, one of his 10 questions is, describe Star Wars in 3 words. And a lot of times we're like, hope. I don't care what the other 2 are, or, whatever. That's what it's about. And that's what hits us in our real world and in our real life is, of course, we're all searching for hope. We're searching for hope in the middle of a global pandemic. We're searching for hope in the midst of a world where people are constantly at odds and groups of people hate each other, all these different things. I love in this, and again, coming back to something that I didn't notice or didn't stand out to me for whatever reason before, along the lines of that same hope and that persistence, is Lando. When they realize that the shield's not down and Akbar is telling everybody to bail out, Lando is there for his friends. Lando is the one going, no, we've got to give them more time. They'll get the shield down. And I don't know why that hit me this time, that it didn't hit me in other times I've watched this movie. But there was such a genuine, and I think it comes from, speaking of redemption, Lando is somebody who was offered redemption. because he betrayed his friends in Empire Strikes Back, or he betrayed his friend and all his new friends that he got. And then it turns out, thanks to the Battle of Tanab, they made him a general and all these other things. But that affected Lando deeply enough that he believed in them. He's not the same person that he was. Redemption changed Lando Calrissian into somebody that he wasn't before. Before he was a swindler, and before he was a charming rogue, and before he was a guy that was looking out for Lando and his capes and all his other things. But then he betrayed his friends in a really crappy way. He turned Han and Leia over to Vader, and then all that stuff went wrong. And he realized it, and he worked to make up for it. And despite what he did, he was given ultimate grace. Like, he was brought in to be a part of the team and a part of the family and given responsibilities. And I think that changed that character. And like I said, I don't know why that hasn't hit me until this viewing and this, working my way through this movie. But when he says to act, we've got to give them more time, they'll get that shield down, and they stick it out. That was huge. Like, that to me said a lot.
That's a really beautiful realization, and I hadn't thought of it either. But that is the result of being redeemed, is showing your gratitude. He could have just rescued Han and been like, okay, I got to go back and take care of my mines at Cloud City, or I got to do something else. No, he stayed with them because he had been given that grace, like you said. So that's great. Yeah.
Well, and it shows that grace can change people, and it go, you can even factor that into Luke and Anakin, and the grace, the redemption, the saving, the willingness not to just strike him down, but he cuts his hand off and realizes, oh wait, I'm following the same path. There's a different way. There's a better way. Gives up, throws it away, and that changes Vader too. The same way, that same love, that same grace changes him, and it changes their path, which is a very Star Wars thing, is for you to have a different path. So that question had a lot. Imagine that. Imagine the three of us having a bunch of things to say about Star Wars.
I can't believe it.
So the last question, and this is our practical application question, which is, where is the text sending us from here? And so this is, what does it say to you? How does it speak to you? What is it, something that you can apply in your life going forward from how you've encountered the sacred text in these moments? Either of you are welcome to go first. I'm not assigning it at this point.
Dad, you go first.
Okay. I think I kind of maybe got ahead of myself, because I think I've kind of said it, was the never give up on the ones you love. I think the literal application there is for me to make sure, if I have a friend, a family member, or someone that I feel has gone down a path or gone somewhere, or is in trouble and needs rescuing, don't give up on them. And you can apply that lesson that has been taught in this film to your real life, because the friends never gave up. Luke never gave up. Han and Leia never gave up. Lando didn't give up, like you were just saying. No, we got to give them more time. Sometimes somebody in your life just needs a little more time, and you want to give up on them. And I have been that person who has given up on someone and then wished I hadn't. So, and in real life, don't give up on the people that you care about, because they may just need a little more time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Timothy, what about you? What is your practical takeaway?
I tried to take notes so that I could organize like what I said, not to get ahead of myself, and it didn't work. But something that I wrote down specifically to say for this, I wrote down, believe in redemption and rise above your own failings. And that's the Return of the Jedi. He believes in the redemption of his father, whether Anakin believes in it or not, and he rises above his own failings. I mean, the Luke Skywalker we started with was a whiny kid, who just wanted more and didn't he didn't have any values beyond the, into a bigger picture. And he gained those and he grew those. And then Empire, we see him trying to learn, but he's also hot-headed and he doesn't know how to listen. But then we see that maybe it was good for him to go, and there's all these other things. And you get to Return of the Jedi, and he has decided he has decided he's a Jedi. He gets to Jabba's palace, and Chewie's telling Han, yeah, he's a Jedi Knight. Jedi Knight. I'm out of it a little while, and everybody gets delusions of grandeur. Like, nobody's told Luke he's a Jedi. He's just decided, I'm a Jedi now. And then he gets to Yoda, and he's like, well, I am a Jedi. And Yoda's like, not yet. He's decided, if I'm going to be a Jedi, then I'm going to be a Jedi. And we know, and what I loved that you pointed out in the previous episodes is that we get to see behind the curtain when no one else is looking. We get to see Luke fall in the Rancor pit and go, well, crap, that wasn't what I thought was going to happen. Like, we get to see him have those moments of uncertainty, and then he handles it like a Jedi. He picks himself back up and goes, okay, if I've decided this is who I'm going to be, then let me be that, and let me decide what that means for myself. And I think learning from the mistakes of your own past, learning from the mistakes you've seen others make, and then deciding to rise above those things and become not just an ideal that you decide is good, but to believe in good. And that is ultimately what George was going for, was to give kids a framework for there is good and there is evil. And that was another thing I had written down. And Dad, you made the comment, like, no one is beyond redemption. And you said, well, maybe Palpatine's not, because, nobody cares about him. And you're right, he's a monster. But I think from a narrative perspective, from a taking it as a sacred text perspective, he represents the embodiment of evil. And I don't know that it is fair for us as mortals to say that in real life, planet Earth, there's a person who is the embodiment of spiritual evil in this world. Right. It is really hard to consider that as a Christian, believing that Jesus, as the embodiment of God, died to redeem the souls of all humanity. It's difficult to think of certain humans throughout history that are included in that list, but it was their choices that made them monsters. Evil is a thing that all of us have a capacity for, and it is choosing good and choosing to rise above that makes us rise above. And for all of the people, all of the monsters throughout history, how many people started out making mistakes and were redeemed by finding value, by finding something greater? And those are the things for us to focus on. It's easy to focus on the monsters, focus on instead on the redemptions. And I think that's, for me, the biggest takeaway is, again, boil it all down to one sentence. No one's ever really gone.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're exactly on the mark, and it kind of channels and trickles because all of these things are connected. For me, the thing that I wrote down, and then I want to call out one other thing that, again, Framey has put in the chat that is so brilliant and ties into everything else that we're saying. For me, I think one of the big takeaways, aside from the things that you guys talked about, for me personally is, and this is funny because, people have very mixed feelings about the Ewoks, allyship, the unexpected nature of where your allies are going to come from. Those were not who they thought were going to be integral to their victory, the things that they needed to do, the goals they were trying to accomplish. But we also live in a real world where we need allies, and whether it's racial, whether it's LGBTQ plus issues, whether it is people who need people to support each other in the world that we live in, like, we need each other. And, to come back to the sequel trilogy, I love the line, there's more of us. And I love it, at the point in Rise of Skywalker when all the ships show up and he says, it's just people. Like, that's us. We're just people. We're the ones that come together in the face of oppression, in the face of exactly what Framey says in the chat. And I wanted to call this up. For us, peace is fragile. Pay attention to signs that oppression could be returning. Be prepared to fight if it slips back into being. The Empire to peace, to the First Order, to peace again. Like, that's where we are in our real world application, is we need each other. We need to support one another because the world is still dark and that dark side of the Force still exists. And so we have the ability to be, the spark. We have the ability. I've thrown out for 2 years now, #spark of positivity. That's the role that we get the opportunity to play. And God knows Twitter is a cesspool half the time. And God knows that the internet as a whole is mostly on fire. But in the midst of that, are you guys, are the Framies and the Matthews and the Michaels and the other people who go, we're here for each other because we love this story. And this story that draws us all together and unites us, points us in a good direction. And it's our our Jedi path is to follow that story because it heads towards the light and points towards the light.
Well said.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well said. Again, we could go for 2 more hours, and I know some of us have, spouses. All 3 of us are going to be wondering, are you coming to bed tonight? So we're not going to do that.
Sorry, we made such a long show for you, but thanks for hanging out with us, everybody.
This has been perfect. This has been exactly what I hoped for and this is the thing. It's not like we had a 20-minute chunk, guys. We had the whole movie. Right. So we had to take extra time to make sure we addressed the whole movie. So I feel like we did a really good job. Before we get out of here, I do want you guys to, I know you've been on a little bit of a break. I know you've got some ideas for some things coming up. Give us some plugs. Where can we find you? What are you doing? What do you got coming up? What do you want to talk about?
Well, I'll say that you can find us at ASFAS92 on Twitter. And then we are dabbling now. I've created an Instagram account for ASFAS, and it is spelled out as Father and Son, all one word, _ASFAS. So if you want to look for us on Instagram, thank you for joining us, Ramey. But yeah, we're dabbling. I'm posting pictures now and then, just stuff when he was a kid, and then just different random things. So Instagram's not necessarily new to me. I've had my own account, but like for As Father and Son, it's new. But we'll see where it goes. I know you can do videos and things on there too. I don't know. We might. As far as new things going, we've just unfortunately been so busy. We haven't had content since last September, but that is a goal. Now that Timothy's settling down, I want to play The Last of Us. I haven't played it since we played it because we're supposed to play it together. So that's like, I really hope we can start playing that game again.
Yeah, we're like I said, back in September, we had made like a plan in the calendar of actually like having consistent content, which is something we've been talking about forever, because you're supposed to be consistent with things, and we'd never been able to. And I was finally like, things are settling. I think we can get this. And then life happened. But now that life is actually settling down, I mean, buying a house is a pretty settling decision. Once I get these boxes unpacked and have this office set up a little bit, we'll be doing more consistent streaming. We'll be hopefully getting back to Twitch streaming as well, on Twitch and on YouTube, doing some gaming and really just chatting and doing this more. We haven't even been able to sit down and do a Boba Fett chat yet, so we've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we do.
But yeah, we had to take a little bit of a break, but we are coming. I think we both kind of had an unspoken understanding that like this was us getting back, and this is going to motivate us to get back on top of things. So thank you for that. We needed that.
Yes.
I am glad to help with that. And I know on behalf of our listeners, on behalf of our Patreons, I always get that wrong. The people that support me hanging out and doing this nonsense on a weekly basis. Thank you to both of you for being a part of this show. Thanks for hanging out. I truly appreciate you guys, both as friends and as Star Wars voices that I really respect. So this has been the perfect way to wrap up our Return of the Jedi canon series. And awesome. I can't wait to see what you guys have coming next. To everybody else that's watching, to everybody in the live chat, if you've stuck with us to the end, thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you for being a part of Podcast of the Wheels, being a patron supporter. It means the world to me. It means the world to Pete. And we're excited to continue to just figure out what ATG Cast is going to be, what this feed is going to be. Streaming Star Wars wrapped up this past Friday after episode 7 of Book of Boba Fett. We're going to take a couple weeks off, but we're probably not going to be able to resist the urge to sit down and run our mouths about something, even if we don't have a new show on yet. But we know that Kenobi's coming in May. There could be something else that comes in between. I don't know. Bad Batch is still on the table. We'll see. So there will be more of ATG Cast. And if you guys are watching right now, this Thursday, we will get the drop of the Alex Damon episode from Return of the Jedi Canon Study. So that's coming up. But otherwise, thanks for hanging out. I hope everybody got the Super Bowl outcome that they wanted. It was the Rams. If it wasn't, I'm sorry. That's the way it goes.
Gryffindor.
Yeah. Before we say goodbye, can I invite you to say goodbye the ASFAS way?
Absolutely.
Can we all three just give them the awkward wave?
All ready?
You know the awkward wave, Nick? Just go on. Yeah. Bye, everybody.